Hi, TV. Hi, everyone. So, we are starting our event with someone very amazing, someone, I personally have a huge regard and respect. I have seen him so versatile, understanding industry deep in and not just trying to master one thing. He is Tathagat Verma. Right now, he is VP Strategy and Chief of Staff with Walmart Global, and he had been into agile, he had been a scientist, he had been an adventurer and been to you know uh, North Pole, I guess, TV.
South Coast and
South
talk.
Pole, okay, and yeah. So, TV, without confusing audience with your introduction, I want to pass the mic to you. I want to hear from you, and for all of us, who you are, what should we know about you, and then
Sure,
we'll go on to the conversation.
sure, Deepti. Thanks a lot. First of all, thanks for asking me to be here. And yeah, good evening, good morning, everyone. I know it takes a lot of passion for anyone to be attending an event like this on a Saturday and Sunday. So first of all, compliments to all of you. And obviously, Deepti, you and your team have done a fantabulous job in really putting this together year after year. So all the kudos to you all for doing this so tirelessly and creating a lot of high quality content for everyone. I know I still remember and I miss those in-person conferences in Gurgaon that we used to have before. But I'm glad to see that you are able to you are able to do an event on 17th, 18th in Bangalore, where I live. Though I'll be tied up in a bunch of things, but I do look forward to catching up one of these days. So just as a matter of introduction to everyone, you feel free to call me TV. It's much easy to remember my name that way. As Deepti told, I work at Walmart Global Tech. I'm based out of Bangalore. I lead the strategy and operations, and I'm also pursuing my doctoral program at this point in time in AI in business strategy. So I'm really very passionate about the whole idea of really how do we adopt AI into the business context. And Yeah, with that, and I've been active in the tech space for last 30 years in various domains, and I still consider myself as a learner because I think there is so many changes happening and so much of things are changing around us that I don't think we can survive a day without learning something new. So with that, I'll give it back to you, Deepti.
Thanks, Stevie. So guys, today the conversation that we are having is about impact of AI and ML, data science, of course, included. On the testing as a skill as well as testing as a career choice. How is it going to impact us? So, TV, the first question, even before we discuss the impact, I want to hear from you. Is it a reality? Like everyone, in a conference or in a talk show, a technology podcast anywhere is talking about AI, ML, and it is such a mammoth right now, or a probably a dinosaur. We are just wondering what it is, a ghost. But do companies really use it to to that extent, or it is just companies like Facebook or Insta is again part of Facebook, say Twitter, or who are doing so much of data analysis and using it for their products. But is it there still in testing, or this is just a conversation and it is probably decades away from us where it will impact our job? What do you think? Is it
Sure.
really happening?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll just give a disclaimer. These are my personal views. It's got nothing to do with the company I work for. That said, Deepti, I think that's a very, very important question. I'll take a step back just so that we all understand the context of what we are saying here. Those who have been tracking or those who've been active in the world of artificial intelligence would know that the whole AI movement itself has been around for about 60, 70 years. And it has already had two near deaths actually in 70s and then later on in 80s. We saw because the hype was so much and the reality was actually falling short of the hype, and it could not deliver what was really promised to the people. So we saw that two near death situations, which is known as AI winter. Uh, Now, as we speak, AI is actually loaded with a lot of promise at this point in time. There are expectations. I think there is a PwC and a McKinsey study that, or projections that say that it's expected to generate an economy of almost $15 trillion by 2030. And yet, when we see there's a lot of learning curve there around it in terms of failures, in terms of I mean, there are surveys after surveys that say 90% of the AI initiatives never see the light of the day. They never get pushed into production, for example. So I think first it's important to understand and take a reality check in and see where we are in this whole journey of evolution. While it would be I'll be the first person to acknowledge that a lot of improvements and a lot of progress has been made in the laboratories when it comes to adoption of AI, and a lot of, for example, a lot of experiments, a lot of interesting projects have been done. But when it comes to reality, there is still a wide gap there. So if you look at, for example, look at the FSD or the full self-driving car, if you look at the entire industry, right, all put together in the last 10 years, more than $100 billion has been poured into that. And we are not anywhere close to a full self-driving car. At best, we are talking about a level 2 competency there. And that too in a kind of a sort of a safe area. It is not really on a public road with definitely not on an Indian road for that matter, right? So and then let me just come to the whole idea of how AI is coming into um, software development part, and then I'll come to testing. In the software development itself, if I'm sure some of the people on this call have read Fred Brooks' seminal paper on NSB, No Silver Bullet, which he wrote in 1976, in which he actually took a position and said software engineering world seems to have seen enough and more of these so-called silver bullets. And we have seen them all, right? We have talked about object-oriented programming. We have talked about Java. We have talked about even Agile to a large extent has been sold as a silver bullet. But none of them really have been able to give an order of magnitude productivity, which is what the great Fred Brooks said back in 1976. Uh, and I think this is no exception there. We still continue to see AI being hyped up. If you look at the whole recent initiatives of can AI be used to write code, for example, and that's like one of the hot problems that is happening. We saw Alpha Code, which is claimed to be an accuracy of 54% when it comes to writing software code. So a lot of those experiments are happening. And while there might be a lot of initial enthusiasm and euphoria about and around them in terms of, hey, this is a cool technology, my personal take on this, Deepti, is that these are interesting ideas at this point in time. I don't think we are talking about a mainstream adoption just yet. I don't think we have kind of broad frameworks that can solve all the problems. There might obviously be very, very narrow problems in terms of, hey, I can do X or I can do Y or I can do this that the companies might have developed on their own. But I believe that it's a very limited scale area. Now, coming to the testing, it's the same thing. I mean, if I look at automation testing, let's take one step back on that, right? In fact, when I look at AI in software testing, I see at least three different big branches emerging out of the whole thing. So one is really the whole idea of using AI to improve the automation so that we can possibly do a better software testing. So that's one thing, so that we can do better scripting. We're talking about self-healing. We're talking about what is being called as spidering AI today. Not a new idea, really, if you ask me. In 90s, we had those I'll not name the commercial names behind it, but they were software that promised us that you just have to use the software and they will record all the key clicks. Wherever you are clicking something, it will record it and it will automate the entire software. I have used them in mid 90s, and I think there was a big gap between the marketing versus the reality, even back then, actually. Now, a lot of progress has obviously been made, but I don't believe that we are at a point where we can actually say that it's a plug and play at this point in time. Like I again said, There might be very narrow use cases where it might be possible. I have a very, very specific web application or something, but the world is not about web applications alone. There is tons of embedded software. There is tons of software running in the servers and backend and what have you. So if we talk about it, I'm taking a full industry approach and not a very narrow point of view here. So one is really using that AI to improve the automation and how do we do the testing. The second thing would be, in my view, how we are using AI to actually not just looking at it from a scripting point of view, but actually looking at a test strategy point of view and saying, okay, how do I improve what test I want to run? How do I improve what kind of a test data should I be designing? What kind of what might be the error prone or sort of what we call as an accident prone areas on a highway, for example. So there might be areas where I'm using that to really design my test strategy and test data. My script is still the same, but what I decide to execute is something that I'm using it for. And then the third area, which is to me probably the most important area in many ways, is actually how do we test and qualify the AI software itself? AI software. Yes, one of our speakers. Thank you. So I think the third area, which is very important, is really because unlike a traditional software, which is in a way we can call it like a deterministic software or a finite state machine, right? I know a software state from A to B is determined, and there is a determinable trigger that will take it from state A to state B, for example. So I can write my test cases, and come what may, how many times I execute it, it will have exactly the same performance in the real world there. Now, as opposed to that, an AI software is very different because the logic is not really hard coded. The moment logic is hard coded, there is no AI or machine learning. The learning component has connotation that it is learning, it is living, it is breathing in some sense. The moment there is no learning, there is no AI software in that. And then it is back to the conventional software, which means if X, then Y. I mean, every software is a glorified version of if then else in some sense, right? Because there is a hard wiring of the logic that is there, and we are able to use the two. But in the case of a machine learning, we are talking about a probabilistic reasoning. We are talking about not a deterministic logic, but a stochastic logic. We are talking about how the data is changing that. Now, that is a very complex thing because you can qualify, like if you're designing software for detecting cancer, for example, in the CT scans, there is always a level of confidence. Even the doctors can never say there is 100% or a 0%. And in fact, even though we might as a patient say, I want to get a second opinion, even the doctors like to get a second opinion. They need to talk to other consultants because there is a lot of human judgment involved in that. Similarly, if I look at it from the point of view of an AI software, it may never have 100% confidence. It may have 60% confidence. It may have 70% confidence, for example. Or in the case of a full self-driving car, it might think that the object in front of me is just a shadow, but it could be somebody who has a dark skin complexion. And then because of the AI software has not been adequately tested for people with a dark skin, it might cause an accident there. So these are the kind of issues that we are beginning to see. So I would really look at those three of the big things that is needed there. And I'm happy to talk about them. So I'll just pause here, but I just wanted to kind of lay the context from where I see it,
Right.
Deepti.
No, 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 that's brilliant. And that is what we actually needed to hear. So, TV, the next thing that is coming up in my mind is if our testers right now want to prepare themselves for anything which is not extremely intelligent as you know AI claims, yet to a certain degree intelligent. What should they be doing? Because what's happening right now, some of them just go and do a data science program, and yet they don't know how to, you know, use it for their advantage. What should they do to go above in their career from a, you know, just a static testing, you know, point of view, from a traditional approach? What more can they do in order to enhance their skills? How can they you know, complement to the intelligent software which has been built probably to detect a lot of issues?
Sure. No, I think that's like uh, a $1 billion question, if not $1 trillion question, because um, the one of the biggest challenges in the adoption of AI and in the full realization of AI's business value potential is lack of suitable skills. And that is across the board. It's not just for testers alone, it's for even for the developers. I mean, the whole industry is scrambling for trained people, while we have data scientists who might be PhDs in computer science or AI or statistics. That doesn't really make the full team, right? You cannot have one person PhD and then expect the whole organization will be able to run at that speed. So I think the first thing I would say is so there is this whole notion which I want to bring here in AI. We call it as AI plus X or X plus AI, and the whole idea there is that, hey, let's say you are a retailer. Now, how much of AI do you need to have? You're not really going to do like core research in that. What you need is, I'm still a retailer at heart, or I'm still a food industry at heart, or I'm still kind of running my route planning if I am an Uber, for example, and I need to have that X plus AI as a way for me to improve my ability to do the business X, for example, whatever I'm doing. As opposed to that, the other point school of thought is that it is AI plus X, so that AI should be in the center of things, and everything else is like AI plus retail, AI plus healthcare, AI plus travel, AI plus XYZ, right? Um, the point I'm making is that I think it's important for us to understand that we are running a real business, right? Everybody is running a real business. So first thing is to understand is that it should be X plus AI approach. First is to really understand the domain part of that, because what we are seeing is a very new kind of system design where there is a huge impact on how consumers are interacting with it, why consumers are doing the way they are doing, for example, and then really use AI based decision making to augment or complement what the human being there is doing there. So I think we are getting into a domain where we are stepping away from a functional boundaries of testing. We are stepping away from the classical software boundaries, which used to be very hard and fast and defined in our requirements. We are going a lot into consumer behavior. We are going a lot into saying, if people bought this book, then they bought another book. Now, this is not really a part of a deterministic behavior. There's a lot of domain knowledge, there's a lot of tacit knowledge in that. So the first thing I would urge all the folks who are in the software testing is that they have to start understanding more of that X part of it, the domain part of what they are into. That's number one. The second part of X plus AI is really looking at the AI part of it. Now, I think everybody over a period of time will have to understand what do we mean when we talk of confidence intervals? What do we mean when we talk of p-value? What do we mean when we talk of linear regression? What do we mean when we talk of Bayesian inference and those things? So you don't have to become a data scientist, but there is a huge opportunity available to improve your knowledge from being a test engineer to somebody who understands the first principles of AI-based systems. Because if you don't understand the nature of those systems, you can be testing them, but you don't know what to expect, and you don't know why is this behavior happening. So, for example, take the case of Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple. There was a very famous case of Steve Wozniak that he tweeted where he said, "My wife and I, we both have the same kind of financial assets. We both applied for a credit card. My wife got credit limit of X. I got the credit limit of 20X. So 20 times that much. Now, there is no logic. If you put on the lens of a software tester, there is no line of code written inside under the hood where it is saying that if applicant is a woman, or if applicant is a man, then give the man 20 times that much. So on what basis is this behavior happening? If you don't understand how the machine learning happens, if you don't understand the impact of training data, if you don't understand how the biases get creeped into that, you will not be able to really figure out why something like this is happening, or you would be filing the bugs. I have no problem with that, but you don't really understand why that behavior is even happening in the first place. So I would focus on really saying your area of focus should be X plus AI both. X is in the domain, understand it more. So for example, as we know, historically women were underbanked in most parts of the world. For example, their financial assets were for multiple of wrong reasons, their financial assets were lower than that. And because of the bias that is already there in the training data, the same bias just continues to perpetuate there. So that X component of the whole socio-cultural, economic, historical, techno-social systems, it's very important part of the whole thing there. Because if you don't understand why something like that is happening, I'll give you another example. I'll not name the company, but a very prominent company was using a machine learning software for screening the resumes for their applicants. And what they found was, again, there was a lot of gender bias in that. It was systematically eliminating women from the applicant pool. So anyone who had a name that was a woman's name, anyone who came from a college that sounded like a woman's name, it would systematically eliminate that. Now, again, on what basis are you going to take a call as a software engineer or as a software tester? What is wrong there? If you don't understand historically what has happened, that the participation of women in the high tech and computer science was historically low, and even if that data was kind of coming from the training historical data, it had that bias, because so it that the AI was learning in a way that women are not a part of this workforce, right? So those are the kind of things I think are very important for people to understand to begin with off the bat.
Makes sense. And that's why, again, constantly keep on checking and digging in. And I think that's why human in the loop comes in the picture. And so, TV, you explained us, you know, at an intellectual level, what we can do in order to adapt our career with the change in technology, with the intelligent technology. But now the question is, if I ask as a layman, what courses, I mean, I'm not promoting certification here, absolutely no. And I'm so happy, unlike Agile, there are not, established certificates, AI for testers kind of thing. But where you think, as students, they start learning, as much as domain knowledge is important, as much as understanding market, user persona, customer need is important, even for the testers to do the justice with intelligent automation. Question is, what should they start learning? What, like, you are doing PhD, you are a constant life learner, you keep learning different things. What is it that they should start with? Still clueless, still going in all directions.
No, I think to me there are a number of ways in which they can get started. First, I would say, for example, I'm sure pretty much everyone is on LinkedIn, for example, and I'm not promoting LinkedIn, but I think LinkedIn is a very good way for anyone to start as a gentle introduction. I'm not a hardcore techie, let us say, and I just want to get a 1 hour introduction of what is really happening there. There's like a lot of courses on that. There are even courses, for example, there is a website, if I'm not mistaken, it is like machinelearningforkids.co.uk. And there are sites like these where actually even school going children can actually start understanding how do you do supervised learning and how do you kind of build it. And it has been designed in such a simple manner that it's really for the middle school or the primary school children that they can do. I advise startups where like one of the startups is actually building those solutions for the school. So I think it is unpardonable in today's world for anybody at any stage of their career, whether whatever role they are playing, not to really be doing it. So get started from wherever you are. You have tons of resources available on Coursera's and Udemy's of the world, or edX of the world. You have tons of reading material on YouTube and LinkedIn and so on. But I would say the one thing that I would say, Deepti, is, in fact, I have done a lot of those courses myself on LinkedIn, for example, and they start very gently and they actually go down to the whole practitioner. So you will, by the end of 1 hour, you would have created, you would have downloaded Jupyter Notebook, you would have started getting Python libraries, you would start building things. So you would actually walk away in just a couple of hours, not only with a high level overview of that, but actually confidence that I can start coding and I can start putting something there. So I think the while there is a lot of things happening there, but the learning curve is not that steep as well.
Thank you. So before we move on to the next question, and I was just, looking at the chat also, there is one more question in alignment to what we were just discussing. Should someone, learn a bit about systems architecture to assist in gaining knowledge around AI plus X, or is it more about mitigating biases?
I would say both of them. I mean, see, bias is one of the biggest challenges. Bias or lack of transparency or lack of fairness, lack of responsible, lack of explainability. These are some of the biggest issues that we are seeing today. And while it was okay as long as we were doing simple things like people who bought this book also bought this book, or if you are watching on Netflix and Netflix says based on your watching viewing history, here is the recommendation. What do? If it is not good, you just pass it, right? And so it's not really. And then again, a lot of the e-commerce and streaming sites will actually show you 8 or 10 of those recommendations. And historically, if they expect only 5 to 10% of those to kind of being there, and even if you pick up 1 out of 5, that is still not a bad deal there. But now we are getting into the whole point where life and death situations are happening, where people are actually getting deprived of real opportunities there, and hence mitigating the bias, understanding how the whole idea of fairness and explainability and transparency and some of these key issues are coming. So that's one part of it. The second part is really on the whole data governance part of that. What is the provenance of data? How is it coming from? What are the sources there? All the entire life cycle of the whole data part of that is an important. It takes a lot of effort in data munging or data wrangling. Actually, I mean, people say between 50 to 80% of a AI or a data science project goes into that. So obviously, if your data is bad, you are going to get a lot of wrong data. In fact, it reminds me, Deepti, of a very interesting thing of how if we don't have the domain knowledge, how can we go wrong? And also, if we don't understand the basic statistics, how can we go wrong? So there,
આપણે જઈએ તો 2000.
TV, you are also muted. You have to unmute yourself. Probably, organize it.
got it. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so there was this very interesting paper in New England Journal of Medicine, one of the very respected journals in medicine, and where there was this researcher. She actually looked at the consumption of ice creams per capita in the countries, and then she looked at the number of Nobel prizes per capita in the same countries. And when she plotted them, there was a very clear link between the more ice creams per capita were consumed, the more Nobel prizes those countries were getting. Now, anyone who does not fully understand that this is a basic spurious correlation, it is not a causation there, it is a correlation, right? Because there is a confounding variable. There is probably prosperity of the nation that has an impact on both of them, because if the nation is prosperous, it probably has more resources for R&D, and the people have more disposable income to enjoy more ice creams per capita. But then if you do not understand the basics of causation, then you are going to create that and say eating ice cream gets more Nobel Prize, let's have ice cream mandatory from tomorrow. So those are again, but that was a fun example. But there is a very interesting case that happened. Actually, it was studied at MIT, or one of the places where asthma patients, for example, are actually prone to more fatalities if there is a pneumonia contraction that happens there. Right now, but what was happening was that the data from the hospital was coming that says it was other way around. Actually, the asthma patients who were contracting pneumonia were actually having very high survival rates. Now, there was no way to explain it. So the whole notion of worldview is very important for us to understand, because if you are a software tester and if you look at that data, you're not going to be able to understand anything, and you are not going to be able to really call that out or flag that out, what is wrong there. Now, it turns out what happens is that the way hospitals behave is a very important part of that tacit knowledge, which is like the moment somebody, especially in the US, the moment there is an asthma patient and the moment there is any contraction of pneumonia, it gets flagged as a red flag event actually. And they get the topmost care. Now, the fact that they get the topmost care, it basically acts in reducing the casualties for the same level of patients here. So if you don't really understand that part of the worldview, no algorithm, no correlation, no software, no automation is going to capture those things. So it's important for us. That's why the whole X plus AI that I was talking about. So I think I would say software people, to your question, Deepti, it's important to understand as much as what is happening under the hood in terms of bias and how the model drifts are happening and how the algorithm is designed and what have you. It's also equally important to understand over the hood what is happening there in terms of the worldview and the externalities and the whole idea of spurious correlations and what have you.
Wonderful, beautiful. So there is this one question. I think it's more of a fundamental kind of question. Someone is asking how to, improve on domain knowledge. I guess it's more of research again, but any thoughts on that? And then we'll progress to the last question of the session.
Sure. No, I think to me, domain knowledge is either ways. I mean, we don't have to wait for AI to come and tell us that domain knowledge is important. I think as we grow in our careers, we have to understand that a lot of, for example, I've seen like 20 years back when I used to be in network management field, the best product manager that we had was actually our head of QA team actually, simply because of the fact that they would understand the whole network topology, and they would be able to understand when they were designing the entire test bed, how exactly the routers interacted with each other and so on there. And then eventually he was the VP of QA, and he became a VP of product management actually. So I think that was yet another career path, kind of a progression there. But I would say that not knowing domain is a cardinal sin in today's world, especially if you are qualifying the systems as a software tester, because your systems are not just sitting inside the laboratories. Your systems are going out and interacting with the real people. And if you don't really understand why people do the things that they do, then I don't think you would be able to qualify. I mean, you are probably going to make a lot of wrong judgment calls for testing them in the lab rather than qualifying them for the real world.
Right, right. Absolutely. I think so. There is interesting, statement from Karun. He says, if everything rely on data, how to know if the data is right for our analysis? Because this may take us to completely different perspective instead of inferring right outcome from AI.
Correct. No, I think that's a very key question, Karun. And a lot of new areas, for example, observability is emerging as a very big area in the whole world of AI and data sciences, where you need to have those mechanisms in place where you're observing constantly, because you cannot really be testing cannot be an afterthought. You cannot just say, okay, I'm done with the cycle and I'm now going to qualify it. You have to keep observing it throughout the whole time. Is my data drifting? Is my model performance drifting there? So the model drift or data drift and in some of these areas are extremely crucial, because one thing we need to understand, as opposed to the traditional software, their performance is going to remain exactly same, because once you code it and once you compile the software and once you put it in production, the logic doesn't change really. And if you've done the software design very well, even after 10 years, if you execute that, even in a, let's say, the worst thing might be it will trap an error condition because it is not designed for that. But in AI software's logic is something that is determined because it is learning. Remember, if it is not learning, it is not AI. That's one thing. And what does it mean for learning? What it means is that if you are sending it a lot of data its way, it is essentially looking for patterns, statistically significant patterns in that data. And based on that data, through supervised learning or through unsupervised or other forms like reinforced learning, it is adapting its behavior to say, okay, this is how it is going to be done there. So its behavior is going to change there. So from that point of view, if I really see, the AI software's behavior is never going to be predictably same throughout. It is going to vary. So observability is going to be a key part of it. And hence the whole testing is more real time in my view than really looking at it as a more episodic part of the whole thing.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. That totally makes sense. And it is just making me think, and we are left with a time box of 5 minutes, but, just loudly thinking in front of you and discussing that everything, like, even in Agile, we talk about a living document, about the software, we talk about a living software, that it will constantly keep on evolving, keep evolving. We talk about products, we are like keep saying, so that you are before market, you are ahead of market, you are not following, you are the not just an early adapter, but you are the innovator. I think that applies to every aspect, of our work, that applies to every field in the industry. So TV, will it be correct? I mean, while I was listening to you and while I was looking at the questions, and the focus is right now at the career of testers, I think it will be right to say that testers can migrate into leadership role, knowing that they understand systems so well and that they have closely worked with developers, they understand developers challenge, they can also migrate to scrum master role. Not sure if we put a lot of weightage to that role or not. uh, Product management you already established as an example. So now, just concluding this session with, I don't know, how far do you see that AI will actually start massively impacting, the roles of tester in a way where the job requirement will reduce? How far do you see it is? And if that is so, should testing be a career choice? And I know it sounds a very cynical question, but it's an important question.
No, I
Everyone
think that's a
thinks
very
about.
important question, Deepti. And I don't have a crystal ball, so I'll just go out on a limb and give my best logical answer that I can think of. And I'll try to embed the explainability inside my answer just so that you have a sense of it. Um, so here's the thing. I think software testing has always been an integral part of software for last 50, 60 years. It keeps adapting based on how things have happened there, but I don't think it will ever go away. In fact, given the nature of AI software as a probabilistic reasoning, indeterministic behavior, it is going to be even more important to actually qualify the software because nobody can really assure what will be the runtime behavior of an AI software. I'm sure some of you remember seeing there was this very famous, or rather infamous case where somebody who was actually buying a stool, a fan actually, somebody was buying a ceiling fan, and the product recommendation that came was actually a stool. And that was actually the worst recommendation that could have been given to anyone. And I don't know if it was a prank or what it was, but it shows the dangers of what it is. So you can be a system designer, you can be a developer, you can be a tester. You have done your job in the lab, but now in the real world, how the system is behaving based on how data is really coming across, I think it will be. So if I have to look at it, it's going to be even more important as at an organizational level. Now, to me, the new roles where the testers will actually be able to grow into over a period of time will be all about really things like ethics and data governance, for example, or for example, how responsible AI or explainable AI is really rolled out in the systems. Because as you said, they already know the developers, they have already been very closely with them. They also now understand the system behavior in the real world, and they will be in a better position to bring the whole element of accountability and explainability and responsibility there, which is not any possible for anyone else to do, because they are the ones who have actually studied the system the closest in the field there. So I think they will have a new opportunity, in my view, to grow into, where they will have a very strong play on behalf of the organizations that they work for, to actually go in front of the customers and consumer boards, or even in terms of compliance and regulatory, and actually say, hey, this is how we are designing our systems. This is how we really embed the whole transparency and explainability and so on there. So I think the career now, that said, just a caveat, the skills will keep changing. I don't think anyone can really sit happy and tight with just what they know. They will have to really go and keep upgrading their own skills. They need to understand AI. They need to understand about data governance. They need to understand about statistics and statistical learning and so on there, so that they are able to play that role on a continuing basis.
Got it. Thank you so much. TV, before I say thanks, I'm going to take that risk. In 2 minutes, if this question can be answered, one of our product uses AI. And for testing, we need to check lots of data before and after processing. Currently, we are using functional techniques or based on file like if CSV, then need to use, many functions and we hook up or, so do we need to use any tool or how can we expertise in this testing? Any thoughts on this or, you know,
So there are a lot of tools available there. I couldn't understand fully the question, but if the question is we need a lot of data and we don't have the data, I mean that's one problem because it in many places it's also referred to as a cold start problem. Like you need a two-sided marketplace, but you don't know there's a buyer and a seller, but on the day one you have neither of them, and how do you really get started there, right? So well, there's a lot of progress happening in an area known as synthetic data. And synthetic data is essentially about creating those, I won't call it as a fake data because data is becoming a first class currency that people are like, people don't want to part with. GDPR is something that was not just limited to Europe alone. GDPR or GDPR kind of regulations are coming all over the world. Every country is protecting their data now. So it's going to be increasingly difficult for people to really get hold of data. And data is really what drives the whole modern day machine learning today. So it is going to be a challenge there, but I don't think it has to be that big of a stumbling block. There's enough work happening on the synthetic data, and there are a lot of tool sets and other things that are so you can design your data, and it's going to really build a lot of randomized near real kind of a data there. Plus, there is a lot of data in the public domain. There are things like data commons or data.gov. In the US and in India also it is there. There is more and more of effort coming. I do know, for example, I think PhonePe had shared some of their transaction data for the last quarter actually. So if you are building something and you want to build something there, obviously there is a lot of anonymization of that data happening, but then there are a lot of things available. So if you are a startup or you're trying to build something new, you do have enough resources available there.
got it. So I think Malay, your question is also answered. And that's a TV. It was such a delight. It was such a great start of unconference. I'm so grateful, and thanking you on behalf of everyone here. Uh, this just boosted, the enthusiasm for rest of the event. Thanks a lot. I wish you a great day ahead, and I hope you'll stay back and be with us for some more time, and we get to meet you in the Bangalore, if not for entire unconference, then for some time.
Sure. No, Deepti, lovely talking to you as always. And thanks for giving me the opportunity. Yes, I'm happy to take any questions there and wish you all the best for the rest of the event. I'll try to hang on as much as I can. But again, thank you and happy to connect with the folks.